Goa, the land of swaying palms, miles of golden beaches, and lush greenery. Its magnificent churches and monuments are a unique cultural synthesis of East and West. Since the landing of Vasco da Gama at Calicut, the Portuguese were looking for a permanent base to control the seas. Goa, with its natural harbors and navigable rivers, provided the perfect location for a strong base station. In 1510, Afonso de Albuquerque finally succeeded in driving out the forces of Adil Shah from the city of Old Goa. This is what has remained of the famous Adil Shah Palace in Old Goa. To mark this victory, immediately after the battle, the Portuguese built the Viceroy's Arch in 1557. The structure was rebuilt completely in 1954. The arch is made of laterite, except for the greenish granite facade. Goa Vela, or Old Goa, under Portuguese domain, attained considerable fame, rivaling Rome in splendor with its lofty churches, convents, and private buildings. In 1560, Old Goa was the second largest city in India after Fatehpur Sikri and the fifth largest in the world. For the Portuguese of the 15th and 16th centuries, any conquest or colonization was done with religious zeal. Christianity had all the necessary royal backing to establish its roots firmly in the soil of Goa.
To get the support from both religious and these locals, Albuquerque only introduced this system. He invited the different orders from different parts of the world to get the moral support from this church authorities and all, as well as he encouraged the local marriages with these Portuguese soldiers also to get the moral support.
The first religious order to settle in the city was the Friars Minor, commonly known as the Franciscans. The lime-plaster structure of the convent and church of St. Francis of Assisi is built of laterite blocks in Tuscan order. The west-facing main entrance is a fine example of Manueline style, popular in Portugal, named after King Manuel. Its main characteristics are twisted piers and an over-decorated entrance. The nave, with 3 chapels on either side. The main altar is in Baroque form with Corinthian features. Most beautifully carved and elegantly designed. St. Francis of Assisi and Jesus on the Cross. St. Francis of Assisi, and the insignia of the Franciscans. Paintings on wood depicting scenes from the life of St. Francis of Assisi. Adjacent to the Church of St. Assisi is Say Cathedral, the biggest church in Asia for the Dominicans. The church is built on a raised plinth of laterite, covered over with lime plaster. This cathedral was built by the Portuguese government for the Dominicans over a period of 75 years. Architecturally, Portuguese Gothic in style, the exterior of the building is Tuscan and the interior Corinthian. It has been recognized as a World Cultural Heritage Site by UNESCO. The main entrance, considered to be the last of the classical order, simple, undecorated, with square abacus. The inscription in Latin records. In 1562, in the reign of King Dom Sebastio, this cathedral was ordered to be erected. The bell tower has the legendary golden bell. The bell was cast in Goa at the foundry of the arsenal in 1652. Its name comes from a Portuguese poem that has immortalized this famous bell. The main altar is dedicated to Saint Catherine of Alexandria. The martyrdom of the saint. The barrel-vaulted structure with gilded altar shows that the church was modeled after the Church of St. Peter's in Rome, the throne of the Archbishop. The papal bull or the Pope's document of 1543 raised this church to the rank of a cathedral or the bishop's church. The church has 8 chapels alongside the aisles and 6 altars in the transept. The chapel dedicated to Saint Sebastian. The chapel of Our Lady of Virtues. The chapel of Blessed Sacrament. A gold-plated painting. Real gold was used in the paint to give a glittering effect in the picture. The face has a distinct Mughal influence. These paintings were done by the artists who visited Agra along with the missionaries to attend Emperor Akbar's religious conference. the chapel dedicated to Our Lady of Life. The chapel dedicated to St. Anthony. The chapel of St. Bernard. The chapel of the Cross of Miracles. The chapel of the Holy Ghost. The altar of St. Anna. The altar dedicated to Our Lady of Dolores. The altar of St. Peter. The altar dedicated to Our Lady of Sorrows. The altar dedicated to Our Lady of Three Necessities. The altar of Our Lady of Hope. To the south of the main road stands the professed house and basilica of Balm Jesus. The Casa Professa, or the professed house, was built by the Jesuits in 1585. The church is declared by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. It has a rich combination of Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian styles of architecture. The main entrance with Corinthian columns supporting the pediment. Inscribed in Portuguese and Latin records, the date of construction is 24th November 1594. The altar of St. Anthony. A beautiful wooden statue of St. Francis Xavier. The church is called Balm Jesus, meaning Good Jesus or Infant Jesus, to whom it is dedicated. The statue of St. Ignatius Loyola, founder of the Order of Jesuits. IHS represent the first three letters of Jesus in Greek. The Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Apart from the richly gilded altars, the interior of the church is remarkable for its simplicity. The facade has the classical orders of the Renaissance, and the altars are in Baroque style. An altar dedicated to Our Lady of Hope. The altar of St. Michael. The Chapel of Blessed Sacrament. chapel with gilded twisted columns and floral decorations of wood. Here, the sacred relics of the body of St. Francis Xavier are kept.
Xavier died in the island of Sanshan, facing the mainland of China, because he wanted to go to China to spread the good news about salvation of Christ. But he died there, and he was buried. After some months, the rector was here. He says, like I'm a rector here now. You see, he told them, bring the bones of St. Francis Xavier. I think he had told them to bring the bones. And they found the body fresh like this, without any injection. Then the body was brought here. It took 2 years to come here. It reached only 1554. They took the body in one of the rooms of the college and shoved that, because there was no approval of the church. The church took 69 years to declare him a saint. So then the body was brought here. But the miracle of preservation, of which the church has pronounced categorically there is intervention of God, remained only for 1 century and about 8 or 9 years. After which the body became shrunk. It was shrinking and became dried up and so. Now we have got only the bones. That's why documents on the 16th century and the beginning of 17th century will say the body of St. Francis Xavier. Now the documents say relics of the body.
The exquisitely carved silver casket containing the sacred relics, the body of St. Francis Xavier. It was once studded with precious stones. The tomb was built by the famous sculptor from Florence, Giovanni Battista Foggini, and it was gifted by the Duke of Tuscany. A masterpiece of Italian art, the portrait of St. Francis Xavier. Portraits of various saints. The Church of Our Lady Rosary stands alone on the western side of Monte Santo, known as the Holy Hill. From this spot, Alfonso de Albuquerque supervised the battle between his forces and those of the Bijapur Sultan for the reconquest of Goa. This votive chapel was built in fulfillment of a vow taken by Alfonso during this battle. The main altar is dedicated to Our Lady of the Rosary. The ribbed vault at the portico shows Gothic influence, but the basic structure follows the Manueline style. A cenotaph in honor of Donna Caterina, whose marriage with Viceroy Garcia de Sa was performed by St. Francis Xavier. The Church of St. Cajetan stands on the northern banks of Mandovi River opposite the Say Cathedral to the east of the town. Modeled on the original design of the Church of St. Peter's in Rome, this church was built by Italian friars. The entrance has Corinthian columns with statues of the apostles. There are 6 altars in addition to the main altar. All are profusely carved and gilded in the Baroque style, with twisted shafts and figures of angels. an altar dedicated to the Holy Family, the altar of Our Lady of Piety, an altar dedicated to St. Clare, the altar of St. John, the altar dedicated to St. Cajetan, the altar of St. Agnes. Paintings of Italian school depicting scenes from the life of St. Cajetan. The main altar is dedicated to Our Lady of Divine Providence.
Church architecture in Goa, they are divided into 7 phases. Out of 7 phases, we are seeing this first and second phase of architecture in Goa. In the first and second phase architecture, if you see that Lady Rosary, the ornamentation is very less, simple church. Church is a hall type church. The choir of the church also simple. There is no any decorations, much decorations like this 17th century churches. Only 3 altars we can see in that. The main altar and side 2 also. Whereas in C Cathedral, SCC, so many side altars will be there. This type of extensive development we cannot see in the early phase. In the second phase, that was the influence of the Renaissance. This architecture turned into different shape, and more mosaic influence took place. The mosaic arts means the pictorial art. You can see in the Cross of Miracles, in front of the Cross of Miracle in C Cathedral, that woodwork, it is the mosaic art like that, pictorial. Whoever comes from Europe, like France, so they can see this Franciscan order. Come from this Spain and Portugal, they can see the Dominican orders, their art and architecture. Like Jesuits, whoever come from Rome, they can see their Jesuits, their establishments. That whoever come from this Italy, they can see that even the Saint Cajetan and this Bomb Jesus.